All right, welcome back to the realm of history for the close of our look at imperialism. We'll take a venture out into Southeast Asia today to really close off this chapter of study on imperialism and how it impacted Africa, the Middle East, India, and then now into Southeast Asia. We will take a look at European intervention here, but also toward the end of the lesson, a look into how the United States got involved in imperialism in this region of the world as well. So we'll start in the Pacific Rim. The Europeans began to race to make claims in the Pacific Rim. Now, the Pacific Rim are the lands of Southeast Asia that border the Pacific Ocean. I'll show you a quick map of what that looks like right here. This is generally known as the Pacific Rim. You've got the Dutch East Indies, you've got the Philippines, you've got Vietnam, Siam, which is modern day Thailand, Burma, and then you could also consider Hawaii, New Zealand, some of those places there as sort of outside of the Pacific Rim as well. Okay, so now the Dutch, the British, the French, and the German groups actually claimed parts of the Pacific Rim. They generally wanted to establish trading ports here. This land was actually perfect for plantation-style agriculture. One of the main products that they grew included rice. Okay, the Dutch really expanded their control. The Dutch East India Trading Company had been in this part of the world for a long time. They added a new area called Indonesia. The Dutch settled Indonesia and established a rigid social class system in rule. The Dutch were pretty ruthless in the way that they ruled the areas that they conquered. They had been doing it for a long time, and they were one of the more harsh European entities when it came to direct control of colonies. Now, the British then got involved and took the Malayan Peninsula. The British seized Singapore, created a trade port and base. They also created colonies in Malaysia and Burma, and the Chinese immigration to Malaysia actually eventually created a problem with population, and so they had to deal with that. The French, they controlled Indochina. Indochina would be Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. They began to export rice from these regions, but this angered the Vietnamese, especially due to lack of food for their own people. We see this happening quite a bit where Europeans are practicing imperialistic policies. They turn some of the production into cash crops, or they start to export the local crops, and then so the local peasants and farmers don't have food. And when you're hungry and starving, that is one of the major catalysts for rebellion. Now, the colonial impact by European entities in this region would include the modernization of these economies. Although this modernization mainly helped European businesses, but at the same time exploited the local populations for doing the work at very low wages. Education, health, and sanitation did improve. Millions of people actually migrated into Southeast Asia to work in mines and on plantations that were built by the Europeans. But colonialism really led to a lot of racial and religious tension in especially this area of the world. Siam remained independent. This is one of the only examples. When you're talking Siam, you're talking Thailand, modern day Thailand. They remained independent, and they served as kind of a neutral zone between the French and British entities there. There was a famous king named King Mongkut. He was responsible for modernizing the Siam economy. He also created an educational system there, reformed the laws and legal system, reorganized and restructured government, built transportation and telegraph systems. So there's a very big modernization process, and ended slavery in modern day Thailand. So a pretty influential figure there. Roman numeral III will take a look at United States and the imperialism that they got involved in the Pacific Islands. First of all, the Philippines. The United States gained the Philippines after the Spanish-American War. They actually took over Cuba as well, and then some other entities that Spain gave up. But the Philippines became a pretty big colony for the United States. However, Emilio Aguinaldo led a Filipino nationalist movement against United States rule there. It was a 3-year nationalist rebellion that ended in 1902 with the United States defeating that rebellion. The U.S. then promised to prepare Filipinos for what's called self-rule, where they would be still part of the United States empire slash colonial imperialistic ideology, but they would be able to make decisions domestically. The focus was on creating cash crops in the Philippines, but like we've seen in other places, this led to food shortages for the local population, so it wasn't the greatest situation. Hawaii. We'll talk a little bit about Hawaii briefly becoming a republic. The Americans established sugarcane plantations on the island of Hawaii. By the mid 1800s, sugar accounted for 75% of Hawaii's overall wealth. United States business leaders wanted to get involved and take over the territory completely. This would be annexation. Annexation is adding territory to a country. The queen or ruler of Hawaii at the time was Queen Liliuokalani. She was the leader of Hawaii that tried to restore Hawaiian independence. American businessmen worked to have her removed from power. In 1894, a famous American businessman named Sanford Dole, you may go to the store and buy Dole products, Dole Pineapples, canned goods. He became the president of the Hawaii Republic, but then the United States officially annexed Hawaii in 1898. Here is a picture of the Queen. She's in the textbook. Just give me 1 second. There she is. There's Queen Liliuokalani. I'm going to read to you. She was Hawaii's only queen and the last monarch of Hawaii. She bitterly regretted her brother's loss of power to American planners and worked to regain power for the Hawaiian monarchy. As queen, she refused to renew a treaty signed by her brother that would have given commercial privileges to foreign businessmen. It was a decision that eventually cost her the crown, but she wanted Hawaii to remain independent.